Let's talk about absolute value. There's a lot of ways to think of absolute value, but one way to think of it is as the distance from zero to a number. So let's in fact use that as our definition of absolute value. So definition, the absolute value of a number is the distance on the number line from zero to that number. Okay, so graphically, we can look at something like the absolute value of 4. Okay, so absolute value of 4. Well, that's the distance from 0 to that number. So let's call this 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, well, let's look at the distance here. Right, there are 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this distance is 4. So absolute value of 4, absolute value being the distance from 0, that is 4. Okay, well, that's simple enough. Let's try negative 4. Okay, so here's 0, and now we're going in the negative 1, 2, 3, 4. So here's negative 4. But again, absolute value is simply the distance on the number line from 0 to the number, and it's 4 units again. So absolute value of negative 4 is 4. This idea of absolute value and distance generalizes well as you go further and further into more advanced math. So it's a good idea to start thinking of it this way now, right? Eventually you'll get into 3-dimensional spaces and 10-dimensional, multi-dimensional, even infinite dimensional spaces, and you'll need a way to talk about the distance from 0 to a number in these spaces, and we use an equivalent of absolute value. So there's a little more to it than what it seems. It's a little more than just a machine that turns negative numbers into positive. That said, an easy way to think of absolute value is as a machine that turns negative numbers to positive and keeps positive numbers as positive. Thus, anytime you want to solve an equation with an absolute value, you have to consider 2 different cases. So let's look at an example. Okay, maybe we want to do absolute value of x equals 6. What could x be in this equation? Well, it could be 2 things. It could be 6 because absolute value of 6 equals 6, but it could also be negative 6 because absolute value of negative 6 also equals 6. So when you go to solve these, the way you do it is you consider 2 separate cases where the stuff on the inside equals the positive value of the quantity outside the absolute value, and the one where the stuff on the inside equals the negative version of the quantity outside of the absolute value. Okay, and that gives you your 2 answers. That works no matter what's inside of the absolute value. Right, so it could be whatever. I'm just going to put a rectangle. The absolute value of the rectangle equals a, right? We break it down into 2 separate cases. Whatever this stuff is in here, that could be anything, equals a positive a, and then the other one, you take the same stuff inside the absolute value, equals negative a, and then you solve. Then solve. So that approach will get you through solving any kind of absolute value equation.